So, who do you think should win the Heisman? Who do you think should win the Davy O'Brien Award? Or the Doak Walker? Or the Jim Thrope Award? Well, in today's video, I'm going to talk about who I think should win every single major college football award. So, without further ado, I would like to say hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with my take on who should win every single major college football award. But before we get into the video itself and start talking about these potential award winners, I am going to go ahead and ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help out the channel if you did. And now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to get started by starting with the Davy O'Brien / Manning Award / Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award / whatever other quarterback award there is. In this segment, I'm going to be talking about who I think deserves to win all of these best quarterback type of awards. My three nominees are Cam Ward from Miami, Shedeur Sanders from Colorado, and Kyle McCord from Syracuse. Quick, a few honorable mentions here. Dillon Gabriel for Oregon is probably the fourth guy on this list that I just left out. I decided to go with three nominees at every position. So unfortunately, even though he is kind of in this conversation, he was the guy that I felt like was the least deserving, especially because of the early season struggles with the Oregon offense. Curtis Rourke is another guy that deserves an honorable mention from me, although he was, unlike Dillon Gabriel, not really a part of this discussion, just someone that I think has been fantastic this year. So moving on to the actual three nominees that we have here. Cam Ward for Miami, over here on the left. He's leading the #1 ranked offense in the country. Unfortunately, they lost to Syracuse last game of the season, so they will not be headed to the ACC championship game and will not make the playoffs. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that he's most likely going to be a Heisman finalist and has been very, very, very good for Miami this year, even though they are going to fall short of their goal to make the playoffs. He has been outstanding and certainly, in my opinion, played his way into the first round discussion for quarterbacks. I'm not sure how highly I'm going to have him rated. I haven't actually gone through the film yet. However, I did really, really like him when I thought he was going to come out last year, because if you remember, when approaching the deadline to declare for the NFL draft, it really was kind of 50-50 if he was going to go to Miami or if he was going to declare for the NFL draft. Ultimately, he made the correct decision, coming back for a 6th year in college football, as this year's quarterback class is much, much weaker than last year's quarterback class, which already has 4 studs with 2 other question marks due to not playing in the case of Michael Penix and injury in the case of J.J. McCarthy. But outside of that, it's like every single one of those quarterbacks has been hits. And that is something that you absolutely love to see. Moving on to Shedeur Sanders, this is someone that I actually thought maybe would have had a conversation to break into that top 5 quarterback discussion in last year's draft class. Right now, heading into this year, before I've kind of done my reworking for the quarterback position as we head into the offseason, Shedeur Sanders is my QB1 in this upcoming draft class. I really, really like him. He's playing at a high level. He's navigating the pocket much better than he was last year. And yes, he does have a lot of talent at the wide receiver position, but so did Joe Burrow, so did Mac Jones, so did Tua Tagovailoa, so did a lot of quarterbacks that end up getting drafted in the top 10, top 20-ish area. His feet are very, very good from a technical standpoint. He's got a good to great arm. Really like the general sort of athleticism. He's not someone you're going to draw up run plays for at the next level. However, he is someone that could take off in a scramble type of situation and pick up 8 to 15 yards, depending upon how open he is in the open field. And then finally, we have maybe the most unexpected member of this top trio here, Kyle McCord from Syracuse. I thought Kyle McCord was a really, really good quarterback at Ohio State. I cover the Big Ten. I talk about the Big Ten for the most part exclusively on this channel. Occasionally, I'll talk about other teams and do other sort of stuff. But for right now, it's pretty much just the Big Ten. And I thought Kyle McCord was very, very good at Ohio State. However, his lack of mobility, coupled with Ohio State's problems along the offensive line, really was kind of their death sentence in terms of their national championship hopes in the 2023 season. And this may or may not be a hot take for Ohio State fans or fans of college football in general, but I think 2023 Ohio State was probably Ryan Day's best team overall. And a large portion of that was the way that Kyle McCord played. He played efficient. He did exactly what the coaching staff asked of him, which was effectively exactly the same thing that Michigan asked of J.J. McCarthy. So not a whole lot. There wasn't a whole lot of opportunities for him to do full field reads. There wasn't a whole lot of opportunities for him to chuck the ball down the field unless it was the obligatory deep shot to Marvin Harrison Jr. Once or twice a game. Didn't really have a whole lot of varied route concepts either. It was a lot of simpler sort of stuff, which was weird because Ryan Day was practically running a high-level NFL offense with C.J. Stroud in terms of the route diversity and the complicated route structure and the reads that C.J. Stroud was asked to do, and then that completely disappeared the next year with Kyle McCord. And as Kyle McCord has proven this year, he could have ran an offense like that very, very effectively. I do believe he leads the country in passing yards. I'm not sure about passing touchdowns, but he is been a very, very effective quarterback for Syracuse and a major reason why they get to that 9-3 mark. They should be ranked. I don't understand why they're not ranked. I think there might be some shenanigans there with the college football playoffs in terms of wanting to make sure Miami's resume isn't as good as Alabama's. Nevertheless, who do I think should win this award? It's very close, but I am going to go with Cam Ward from Miami. If you look at the stats here, and the stats are not the full story, but 67.2% completion percentage, 3,774 passing yards, 34 passing touchdowns, 177 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, a QBR of 87.9, and a 91.8 PFF grade. And Pro Football Focus, even though I do have points of contention with how they do grades and stuff like that, it really isn't with the quarterback position. I actually think, generally speaking, they do a really good job at measuring in objective sense how good a player is playing, especially at the NFL level. Now, obviously, there are outliers and exceptions to those rules, but generally those are like 1 or 2 players, when with the other 50 that they've done breakdowns for are almost exactly accurate. When it comes down to it, I think that Miami without Cam Ward is a team that doesn't make a bowl game. I think Kyle McCord is also in that same level. However, I don't think Kyle McCord elevated the team to the level that Miami had been elevated to by Cam Ward. And that was ultimately the factor that led to my decision to say that Cam Ward is, in fact, the best quarterback in college football this year and the winner of JSA's Best Quarterback Award 2024. Moving on to a position that we are not going to spend nearly as much time talking about. That is the Doak Walker / Best Running Back Award. And even though I do want to highlight my other 2 finalists here in Caleb Johnson out of Iowa and Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina, Boise State's running back Aston Jeanty is the winner of this award. He's having the best running back season since Melvin Gordon. This is not a situation where a guy is pat-statting. In fact, he actually has lost a game, so to speak, because he sat out 2 entire second halves of the season this year. So these are his stats through 11 games in reality. 313 carries 2,287 rushing yards, 28 rushing touchdowns. That's 7.3 yards per carry. He has 123 forced missed tackles. He has 55 rushes of 10 plus, and he has a 95.3 Pro Football Focus grade, which I believe is the highest that any player has ever had in the history of their site. He is having an all-time year from the running back position. This is probably going to go down as a top 5 running back season in the history of college football. Unfortunately for him, it will never be number 1. That is Barry Sanders. It will never, ever, in 100 million years, ever be touched. But all in all, this is probably the second easiest decision that I had to make in this whole video, is giving the Doak Walker Award to Aston Jeanty. Moving on to a slightly more interesting conversation, that is the Fred Biletnikoff Award, given annually to college football's best wide receiver. My 3 finalists for this award are Tet McMillan from Arizona, Xavier Restrepo, wide receiver from Miami, and Nick Nash, wide receiver from San Jose State. However, I do have to give out a special shout out to Trey Harris. He was running away with this award through 8 weeks in the season, and unfortunately he got hurt, so I couldn't really include him in this conversation, although for the majority of this season, he was the best wide receiver in college football by a relatively large margin. Circling back here to all the way on the left, we have Tet McMillan, and this is just a physical freak of nature, the stereotypical power forward, X wide receiver, jump ball kind of guy. But he has a surprising amount of agility in the open field, as well as crispness to his routes. This is a very, very, very good football player. I love him, and just from an athleticism perspective, and nobody will ever compare to Calvin Johnson, but from an athleticism perspective, Tet McMillan is the closest that we have seen to Calvin Johnson since Calvin Johnson. There have been other players like Julio Jones, who's probably just as good as Calvin Johnson, but Calvin Johnson was 30 pounds heavier and 3 inches taller than Julio Jones. Tet McMillan is a legitimate 6'5", 215, and has reportedly a 40-plus inch vertical. This is a superior athlete and a dominant player. On the complete and utter opposite end of the spectrum here, we have Xavier Restrepo, the wide receiver from Miami. This is a stereotypical slot sort of wide receiver. This is a guy that wins with quickness and explosiveness as opposed to physicality and just the it's my ball mentality that Tet McMillan has. And this is someone who is listed at 5'10", 198 pounds. This is a very, very good wide receiver. It would not shock me if he found his way into the first round of the NFL draft. This draft class, especially considering how questionable this draft is in terms of its depth past the top 10 guys in the class. Xavier Restrepo is much faster than people give him credit for. He's a much better deep threat than people give him credit for. And he is a phenomenal route runner, working over the middle of the field while also having the physicality and toughness after the catch to turn open plays into big gains. And then finally, we have Nick Nash, the San Jose State wide receiver, who is leading college football in just about every single statistical category. He has been very, very good this year, has certainly talked his way into getting a draftable grade for me. He's listed at 6'3" and 195 pounds. This is someone who I think could end up working his way into day 2 with a good combine performance. But ultimately, of these 3 wide receivers here, who should win the Fred Biletnikoff Award? And this one, I will freely admit bias on. I am picking Tet McMillan to win this award simply because I like him as a player. I think he is a fantastic football player. I think he's a top 5 player in this upcoming draft class. He's wide receiver 1 for me by a mile right now. Luther Burden and Travis Hunter, who we'll get to later, are very close to him. I'll probably end up having top 10, top 20 grades on those players as well. However, Ted McMillan, looks to me like an AJ Green, sort of Julio Jones level. Like, you can't miss with this kind of player level of prospect. I adore his game, and I really, really think that he is going to be something special at the NFL level. His stats this year, although they don't particularly look all that good: 78 catches, 1,248 yards, 7 touchdowns, 16 yards per catch. Arizona had a dramatic drop-off in talent when Jedd Fisch left, and a dramatic drop-off in coaching ability after Jedd Fisch left, and that has really affected Ted McMillan and his numbers. If you go back a year, the numbers are better, and this is an elite level football player, bottom line. Moving on to our next award discussion here, and that is, of course, the John Mackey Award, given annually to the best tight end in all of college football. And I'm not sure, at least in the past 4 or 5 years, there has been a stronger trio of tight ends to don this award as finalists. We have, of course, Harold Fanden Jr. from Bowling Green on the left over here. We have Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State, in the middle, and Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan, on the right. These are 3 very, very good football players, elite level players at this position. Warren and Loveland are probably going to be first-round picks. It would not surprise me if Warren ended up working his way into that conversation by the time scouting combine rolls around. Colston Loveland, in my opinion, is as close to a first-round lock as you can get. And Harold Fanden, I would need to see some athleticism numbers from him. And also, he's much lighter than the other 2 guys, so that is a little bit limiting in terms of actually playing the tight end position. But all things considered, who should win this award? Well, I'll make the arguments for Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, and Harold Fanden here individually. For Colston Loveland, he was the Michigan offense this year. If you watched a Michigan football game in which Colston Loveland played, he was the only way that they were moving the ball in the air. In the games where he wasn't targeted, they didn't do anything. In the games where he was targeted, they didn't do a whole lot, but they did basically everything because of him. And when you look at Tyler Warren, this is the entire Penn State offense as well, basically. This is a guy that they've got in the Wildcat, doing things in the Wildcat. He's running the football. He's catching screens. They're doing a lot of really, really cool stuff with Tyler Warren over there at Penn State. This is a very, very, very good tight end player and someone that I really, really like. However, Harold Fanden Jr. is obliterating the competition statistically. And to be honest, a major reason why I am giving the award to him is simply because I want to highlight lower level players like Harold Fanden Jr. This is a very, very good football player at the college level and someone who I think could work his way with a good combine into the day 2 conversation. I really, really like his game. I think he's been phenomenal for Bowling Green this year, who is becoming a legitimate football program, by the way. They had a really good team last year, and they ended up, I think, 7-5, but they ended up having like a top 30 defense in all of college football. So that was a really, really good team last year. And this year, I think they are better. They were in the conversation for the MAC championship game until the very last week of the season when they lost to Miami of Ohio. If they'd won that game, they would have made the MAC championship game. So this is a team that was very close to competing for a championship, and I very much like Harold Fanden and that Bowling Green team as well. Harold Fanden currently has 100 catches, 1,342 yards and 9 receiving touchdowns for 13.9 yards per catch. That is obliterating every tight end in college football that is not Tyler Warren. And even then, he's several hundred yards ahead of Tyler Warren. Moving on to the Outland Award, given annually to the best interior player. And unfortunately for the offensive side of the ball, I have 3 defensive players here on the Outland Award finalists. Our finalists are from left to right: Alfred Collins, a defensive tackle, nose tackle kind of, out of Texas; Walter Noland, a defensive tackle out of Ole Miss; and Mason Graham, a defensive tackle out of Michigan. And as much as I like Alfred Collins this year, he has been a dominant run defender, a very, very, very good football player. I like him a lot as an NFL prospect, as a nose tackle. He's 6'5", 320 pounds. And Walter Noland, as a 3 technique at the next level, has been phenomenal this year as well. But neither of them compared to the impact that Mason Graham has every single week. Mason Graham's numbers don't look all that impressive in isolation. 40 total tackles, 28 solo tackles, 5 sacks, 34 pressures. Those aren't incredible numbers, I'll give you that. But if you watch any Michigan game, it is very obvious who the best player on the field is every single time he's on the field. And even though Wink Martindale was playing him at a defensive end position a lot this year, he even kind of did that pretty well as well. This is a elite caliber football player. He is maybe the best defensive tackle prospect since Aaron Donald. This is a phenomenal football player and is a top 5 lock in the NFL draft. And in my opinion, someone contending for the first pick of the draft. We are now moving on to the Ted Hendricks Award, given out annually to the best defensive end / edge rusher in all of college football. This is a very, very tough conversation for me, and ultimately I had to pick who I picked to win this award simply because I don't think enough people are talking about how elite they have been this year. On the left side of your screen, we have Kyle Kennard, an edge rusher for South Carolina. In the middle, we have Josiah Stewart, an edge rusher from Michigan. And on the right, we have Princely Umanmielen, who I believe that's how you say the name. I could be wrong, but I believe it's Umanmielen, who has been fantastic for Ole Miss this year. I actually thought he was kind of overrated when he was at Florida, but this year, with the other pieces that Ole Miss has on the defensive line, it's put him in a lot more one-on-one situations, and he has thrived. Kyle Kennard, also for South Carolina, with Stewart, the edge rusher opposite of him, that 5-star true freshman who's been unbelievable so far this year. He was also in the conversation for this award as well. However, ultimately, the numbers weren't there, and he did kind of hit a wall about 8 games into the season when the production really started to slip. And then, of course, Josiah Stewart has Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham on the interior, along with Derek Moore, another very, very good defensive end, opposite of him to help create one-on-one matchups. So is this award and is production at the defensive end position kind of correlated with how good the rest of the defensive line is? I mean, yes, but that's true with every position, really. A quarterback can't be good without a good offensive line. Can't be good if wide receivers aren't getting open. A corner can't be great if the safeties are busting coverages all the time. And a linebacker can't be good if the defensive line isn't drawing double teams. So this is a team sport. I don't want to hear anybody talk about how much help either of these players had. All of that being said, who do I think deserves this award? Call me a homer if you must, but I'm giving this award to Josiah Stewart. This is a phenomenal football player. And what the stats don't show you is how unbelievably good for someone of his size he is in the run game. He is a fantastic run defender and also someone that has dropped back into coverage and been effective in that role as well. But by the pure pass rusher numbers this year, he has 8.5 sacks, 36 pressures, a 17% pressure rate, meaning that on all of his pass rush attempts, he has a 17% chance of creating pressure. That is a good, very good number. He has 13 tackles for loss in the run game and 2 forced fumbles. This is an elite football player. He is someone who has played his way, in my opinion, into the first round conversation. This is a very, very, very good football player. And in a weaker draft class where really the edge rushers are the only real strength of this upcoming draft class, in terms of one that has top end talent and depth, he is still someone that I think is going to be a riser throughout the offseason process, especially when teams get to interviews. Moving on to the Dick Butkus Award, given out annually to the best linebacker in all of college football. This one was a very, very difficult choice. I spent quite a bit of time thinking about this one, even to come up with the 3 finalists, because there has been some very, very high level linebacker play this year. Sean Dolak out of Buffalo is someone who I think has been very, very good, although he is a little bit undersized for the position. All in all, just a very, very good player. I like him a lot. Anthony Hill out of Texas is also someone that deserves to be shouted out, as well as Cody Simon for Ohio State. He's been phenomenal this year. However, all of that being said, the 3 finalists for this award are Chris Paul Jr., no relation, of course, to current San Antonio point guard Chris Paul, Jay Higgins for Iowa over there on the right, and Austin Romaine, like the lettuce, in the middle, out of Kansas State. All 3 of these guys are very, very good players, dominant in the run game, elite in coverage, and very effective pass rushers as well. However, there is one player that rose to the top for me after I decided to study the film a little bit more closely on these 3 players, and that is Chris Paul Jr. This is someone that I really, really like. I think he is a phenomenal football player who has upside in pretty much any role that you want to put a linebacker in. You could put him in a run and chase sort of will role. You could put him as a Sam and stand him up on the edge occasionally. You could have him as a true Mike linebacker calling plays for your defense. This is a phenomenal all-around player, and the stats show it. 48 solo tackles, 86 total tackles, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble. PFF credits him with 6 sacks, which is interesting because ESPN only has him credited with 3.5 sacks, but he does have 6 sacks according to Pro Football Focus, so I'm going to go with that because it's the bigger number. And he has a 33.8 pressure rate. That is an absurd number for someone who blitzes as often as Chris Paul Jr. does. This is a very, very good football player who has a tremendous amount of versatility, not only in scheme, but in role as well. And I really, really think he has been a phenomenal football player for Ole Miss this season. Moving on to the Best Defensive Back Award, the Jim Thrope Award. And this one, I almost thought about splitting it into corners and safeties. However, there isn't really an award that is for just the best safeties or the best corners or even the best nickels, all 3 of which I consider to be separate positions. So I ended up just sticking with the one sort of award for defensive backs. And this one might ruffle some feathers that I have with the award finalists and the award winner. However, The finalists are Caleb Downs from Ohio State, future first-round pick at the safety position, Travis Hunter, cornerback from Colorado, and Malachi Starks, safety from Georgia. Let's go ahead and start with the two safeties here. We'll go with Caleb Downs first, then get to Malachi Starks, and then Travis Hunter, and the argument for each of them. Caleb Downs came in and solved Ohio State's biggest problem that they had last year, which was the safety play. His presence has dramatically improved the level of play of several players for Ohio State's defense, most notably Latham Ransom, who has been a liability for that defense the past 2 years, if we're being entirely honest, and has turned out to be a very, very quality player this season. Malachi Starks, I have for 2 years now been talking about how phenomenal he is and how I think he's going to be a top 10 player and how I just adore his game. He is a freak of nature when it comes to athleticism and when it comes to football intelligence as well. He is an incredibly smart football player. And of course, we have Travis Hunter. He is, without argument, the best corner in college football. With Will Johnson being hurt and missing the second half of the season, and Benjamin Morrison also being hurt and missing the season, and the kid out of ECU being hurt and missing the season, whose name I am forgetting. He was also very, very good. However, with those three players out of college football, there is no argument for another corner to be better than Travis Hunter, who has been an absolute black hole on defense. Teams do not throw his way, and when they do, they pay for it. And that is why I have Travis Hunter winning the Jim Thrope Award. Now, in real life, he's not nominated for this award because that's a ridiculous thing that has happened for college football and for the Jim Thrope Award, for him to not be named a finalist. If they want to give it to somebody else, fine, I don't care. But for him to not be a finalist for that award is an absolute absurdity. He has been unbelievable this season, especially in the second half of the season. He has 20 solo tackles, 11 assists, 11 pass deflections / pass breakups, 4 interceptions on 39 targets. Meaning that if you throw the ball his direction, there is a 38.5% chance that he's going to get his hands on it, which is absolutely absurd. Teams are barely targeting him more than 3 times a game. And to put how absurd that 39 targets number is in perspective, Will Johnson, who many people consider to be the best defensive back in the country, who played in half the amount of games that Travis Hunter did, was targeted 26 times. Meaning, had he played 12 games, was on pace to be targeted 52 times, as opposed to Travis Hunter, who was targeted 39 times in 12 games. That is actually insane how infrequently teams target Travis Hunter. And that's because he is a blanket on the outside. Zone coverage, man coverage, it doesn't matter. And I understand that a lot of people are going to go back to the Stanford game last year. Cool. Putting a barely 6 foot, 180-pound corner on a guy that's 6'5" and 230 pounds, that's a coaching problem, not a player problem. You can't expect him to win with that level of physicality. And guess what? They haven't expected him to this year. And also, he wasn't particularly given the opportunity to show that he had improved, which I do believe he has improved, at covering more physical receivers this season, as he only played 10 snaps against Arizona. He did get hurt in that game. However, potentially seeing him matched up with Ted McMillan in a big-time game, well, it wouldn't have been a big-time game. Arizona sucks. But it would have been a big bounce-back game for him, as he had his worst game of the season against Kansas State the previous week. Oh, and all of these things as well, he only gave up 1 touchdown. This is a very, very, very elite caliber cornerback prospect. Moving on to the Defensive Player of the Year award. My finalists for this are Travis Hunter, obviously, Jahdae Brown, nickel / outside corner. He split his time there pretty much evenly. I think it's about like 60-40 between being in the slot and being outside. He does project at the next level as a nickel, however. So if I had decided to split the defensive back group into 3 different ones, he would have won the award for best nickel. And, of course, Kyle Kennard, simply because I like Kyle Kennard a whole lot. But this is another one that I did not spend a whole lot of time thinking about, much like the Best Defensive Back award. Guess what? Travis Hunter wins again. He has been, in my opinion, the best defensive player in college football this year. And I don't even really particularly think it's that close. I mean, when you can eliminate half of the field, which is effectively what he does and what has he done this year in every game except for the Kansas State game. And by the way, I don't want to hear shit about that game. I don't want to hear it. He had a bad game. Cool. Everybody has a bad game. Everybody. Literally everybody. Every single player that you want to throw at me that could have won this award or, in your opinion, should have won the award, they had a bad game this year too. The fact of the reality is that Travis Hunter, at the college level, I'm not saying he's going to do this at the NFL level, but at the college level, has a Revis Island kind of effect on opposing offenses. They don't throw the ball his way because he's either going to knock it away or pick it off. This is an elite caliber corner and the best defensive player in college football. Moving on to the more specialist award here, we have the Paul Harding Award given out to the nation's most versatile player. And this one, I can't even pretend that there are 3 people deserving of this award. This one's going to go to Travis Hunter too. I'm going to put the stats up on the screen here. Again, 31 total tackles, 11 pass breakups, 4 interceptions, 39 total targets, which is an absurd number. Offensively, he's putting up a top 5 statistical season in the country. Again, it was very close to putting him in the conversation for the Biletnikoff Award that I did mention that. He's a very, very good wide receiver as well. In fact, he will have separate first-round grades for me as just a wide receiver and just a corner. Very unbelievably talented player on both sides of the ball. 92 catches, 1,152 yards, 14 total touchdowns. This is a very, very good wide receiver, as well as being the best defensive player in college football. Moving on to my Coach of the Year award, I have 2 runners up. That is, of course, Kenny Dillingham, the Arizona State head coach. They have gone 10-2 this season and secured a spot in the Big 12 championship game. Deion Sanders, 9-3. They should have beaten Nebraska. Seeing how these 2 teams finished the season, Nebraska 6-6, honestly not that good. Colorado 9-3, a contender for the Big 12 championship game until the very last game of the season. Really should have beaten Nebraska. I think that does change the narrative surrounding this team a little bit because they'd probably be ranked inside the top 20 as opposed to just barely being inside the top 25. All in all, I really, really respect both of these coaches. I think they've done phenomenal jobs this year, but the winner of this award can be no one else other than Curt Cignetti, taking an Indiana program that has, quite honestly, never been this good before and turning it into a playoff team is an absolutely absurd turnaround. Like, maybe Dillingham is going to do that at Arizona State. He's going to have to get through Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. Deion Sanders was also pretty close to getting to that Big 12 championship game as well. However, Indiana's in already. They're in already. They finished tied for second place in the Big Ten, only not getting into the championship game due to tiebreakers versus a team they didn't play in Penn State. They had played Penn State, maybe they win that game, and maybe they're in the Big Ten championship right now. However, this is a phenomenal turnaround. They went 3-9 last year, and I get that it's not the same roster. They've got like 50 new players. I understand that. But going from 3-9 to 11-1, especially when literally no one, and I mean this, no one thought Indiana was a contender for the college football playoffs. If you put money down on Indiana to make the college football playoffs, like if you put a significant amount of money, like $10,000 down, you could bankrupt all of Las Vegas, because the cash out and the odds on that would have been like plus $1 million. It was absolutely absurd, the job that he has done in year one with Indiana. Moving on now to the Broyles Award, given out to the best assistant coach in all of college football. My 3 finalists for this award are Dirk Koetter, offensive coordinator out of Boise State, Will Stein, offensive coordinator out of Oregon, and John Heacock, defensive coordinator for Iowa State. This is an interesting conversation that ultimately came down to Will Stein and John Heacock. I did want to throw Koetter in there. I really like what he's done at Boise State, and no, it's not just because Aston Jeanty is putting up absurd numbers. Their passing game is very effective and an underrated part of that team, and also the line play that he has gotten and has schemed up these runs has been fantastic. This is a very, very good offensive coordinator, in my opinion. However, it ultimately came down to John Heacock and Will Stein, offensive coordinator for Oregon and defensive coordinator for Iowa State. And I guess what it came down to is I think Will Stein wins it in real life. So I'm going to give it to the guy that I think deserves the recognition as well. And that's John Heacock, the Iowa State defensive coordinator. I think Iowa State has done a phenomenal job on the defensive side of the ball this year. That might be a top 10 defense in all of college football. They've been absolutely fantastic. They're almost never caught sleeping. They're almost never missing tackles. It's just a tremendously well-coached unit, and I really respect John Heacock and the job that he has done at Iowa State this season. And because of that, I am giving the award to him. And, of course, last but certainly not least, we have the Heisman Trophy, the Walter Camp, the Player of the Year award, whatever you want. The Heisman Trophy is the one I've run with here because I'm going to put the Heisman Trophy in the thumbnail. Okay? This is the award given out to the best player in college football. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people think that means the best quarterback in college football. And an even vaster majority think that means the best offensive player in college football. I made a whole video last year talking about how each player should have won the Heisman Trophy, going all the way back to, I believe, 1997, the year I was born. So through my entire lifetime, who should have won the Heisman Trophy every year. I'll put a stamp in here so you can go look at that video if you want to. But that is not the case, and I will not allow that to be the discussion on my own fucking channel, okay? No. This is the award given out to the best player in college football. And there is only one player in college football that has an argument to be the best player in college football, even though we're seeing all-time great at another position. However, we're also seeing all-time great at 2 positions. Not only is Travis Hunter going to win the Heisman Trophy in real life, the question should be not whether he's going to win, but whether or not it should be a unanimous decision. He is having, bar none, the best season in the history of college football. This is the best defensive player in college football, combined with having a legitimate argument to be the best wide receiver in college football and one of the 5 best offensive players in college football. We have never seen this happen before, not in any of our lifetimes. If you think Aston Jeanty should win the Heisman, cool, that's fine. He's having a Heisman type of year. But sometimes, and this always happens, I don't really know why, sometimes, like 2 years ago with Bryce Young, we don't really have a Heisman season, but they got to give it to somebody. So they give it to the best player in college football, which that year probably was Bryce Young. Last year, we actually did have a Heisman type of season, and that was Jaden Daniels, and he won the award, and he deserved it. But a lot of the time, what you see is the truly worthy of winning the award type of seasons, for whatever reason, happen in the same goddamn year. And this year just so happens to be one of those types of years. Aston Jeanty wins the Heisman easily last year. He wins the Heisman easily the year before that. Hell, if we go back even further, I think he probably wins it over Devonta Smith and goddamn maybe everybody except Joe Burrow in the past 20 years or so. There's a very, very real possibility that Aston Jeanty breaks Barry Sanders' total yardage record for the running back position in this season. He's got 2 more games practically guaranteed unless they get upset in the Mountain West Championship game, which could happen. I mean, UNLV is a very, very good football team. We'll talk about that on Friday if you want to hear my thoughts about that. However, this was the easiest decision in this entire video. I did not even consider anybody else to really win this award. Genuinely. There is no argument to be made for Aston Jeanty to win the award. And people are going to be like, oh, we've never seen what he's doing at the running back position. Yes, we have. In fact, we've seen it multiple times in the past decade. Just because he's having probably the best season out of all of those running backs doesn't mean that Melvin Gordon isn't in the conversation. It doesn't mean that Rashad Penny isn't in the conversation. It doesn't mean that Monte Ball isn't in the conversation, okay? We've seen running backs have elite all-time caliber seasons similar to Aston Jeanty, and they had no chance to win the Heisman. Legitimately. None of those players were ever going to win the Heisman. Now, Melvin Gordon specifically had a really, really good argument to win the Heisman that year. Rashad Penny, Monte Hall, not so much. But those were still elite caliber running back teams. And also, I just want to throw this out there. Had Blake Corum not gotten hurt, he probably wins the Heisman that year as well. And he probably finishes the regular season with right around 2,000 yards. So only 200 yards short of what Aston Jeanty has this year. And as great as Aston Jeanty has been, saying that we haven't seen what he's doing before is a bold-faced lie. Flat out and straight up. What we have never seen before is Travis Hunter. We have never seen an elite caliber player on both sides of the ball. I mean, hell, they gave Charles Woodson the Heisman because he came in and caught 10 passes over the course of a year at the wide receiver position. They gave Peppers an invite to the ceremony because he had, one offensive rushing touchdown the entire year? Because even doing that is wildly impressive. Coming in and being able to contribute on offense as well as defense is actually crazy. Let alone to have an argument to be the best player at both of those positions, which Travis Hunter, whether or not you think it's true, is irrelevant. He's in the conversation, okay? He is going to feature in those Nissan Heisman House commercials next season, and there's not a goddamn thing that you can do about it. He is going to win the award. He should win the award, and it's absurd to think that anybody else in the history of college football, yes, even over Joe Burrow, should have won the award over him. But that's just me. And what do I know? After all, I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. To this point, I'd like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.